So we've talked about the Constitutional Convention of 1787. We talked about that George Washington was in charge. We talked about Ben Franklin was asleep, all of that. So that's not new, okay? But I want to continue along those lines to look at some of the problems that existed with the final Constitution. When we were talking about it before, the Constitution had a number of problems while they were debating it. One of them was the differences between the Virginia plan, which gave the most populous states the most power, and the New Jersey plan, which gave each state an equal say. And then what was the solution to that problem?
By population.
No. What was the solution? There was something that was proposed to solve that. Go.
The Great Compromise.
The Great Compromise, or the Connecticut Compromise, is written by Roger Sherman, which said let's have a lower house based on population and an upper house where each state gets the same number of votes. But there were other problems as well. For example, slavery. Southern states said, well, we're going to count the slaves as part of our population so that we have representation in the lower house greater than our white population. The northern states balked at that. They said, what are you talking about? None of those slaves has any political power. They can't vote. How can you count them? The southern's response was, we do the same for women. For people under the age of 21, they get counted. Why can't we count the slaves? The solution was count up the number of slaves, multiply by 3.5 or 3/5, and then add that to your population total. They chose 3/5 because if you figured the slave population in the South, that would give the South equal representation in the House of Representatives with the North. That was one solution. Obviously, the racist connotation there is that a slave or black person was only worth 3/5 of a white person, and we hear that today, even now during Black History Month. But there were other concerns. When the Constitution was written, many felt that the federal government was too powerful, that it felt like a monarchy, and that a president could easily turn into a king, and that was an issue. Others felt that the states were not powerful enough, that under the Articles of Confederation, the states were extremely powerful. They were like their own little countries. They could have their own army. They could coin their own money. That was an enormous power. But under the Constitution, they could not do any of those things. And probably one of the largest complaints levied against the Constitution was there was no Bill of Rights. Even the British had written bills of rights in the 17th century. Two groups emerged at the end of the Constitutional Convention. The Federalists, who were in favor of the Constitution, and the Anti-Federalists, genius name, opposed to the Constitution. Okay? And we know about the Federalists. We talked about them. They were the ones that had to sell the country on the Constitution. What did they use to do that selling? What did they use to sell the country on the Constitution? A series of essays.
Federalist Papers?
Called the Federalist Papers, correct? What two did we read in class?
10 and 51.
10 and 51. Okay? Now, the Federalists want the Constitution, the Anti-Federalists don't. To convince the Anti-Federalists to join them, they agreed to a number of things. One, a Bill of Rights would be added immediately after the Constitution was adopted. And it was, in 1789. Now, with the Constitution now the new form of government in the United States, the Federalists will morph into the Federalist Party. This and this are not the same thing. Even though they have the same name, these two things are not the same. This is a group that wanted the Constitution. This is a political party. The Federalist Party were very much in favor of the federal government being the most powerful. That when people had problems that needed solutions, the federal government was best suited to solve those problems. The Anti-Federalists morphed into a group called the Democratic Republicans, who felt that solutions to people's problems should come from the states, who knew them best, and not from the federal government. The federal government should merely exist as an organizing unit. The Anti-Federalists will morph into this group, the Democratic Republicans. The Federalists will morph into the political party of the Federalists. They will win one election, John Adams, in 1796. Then the Democratic Republicans will win the election of 1800 with Thomas Jefferson, who's so popular they actually begin calling the Democratic Republicans the Jeffersonian Republicans. They will stay in power through 1824. And then eventually in 1828, the Jacksonians will come to power. They are called the Jacksonian Democrats. These are the Democrats you know today. Same party. Different ideas, same party. And when the Jacksonians come to power, the Whigs become popular, and the Federalists have fallen away. After a while, the Whigs will kind of fall out of favor around the time of the Civil War. And we need a new party, an anti-slavery party. And that party will be this party, the Republican Party. And who is their first president? Abraham Lincoln. This is the Republicans you know today. In fact, they called themselves the Republicans because they so loved Thomas Jefferson and this ideology of the states being more powerful that they took the name Republicans. But yet, they still were an anti-slave party. Okay? The Democrats that we know today are not the heirs of the anti-federalist states' rights group. In fact, they believe more in the federal government. So you can see how their ideologies change and grow over time. Do you understand this? Now let's look at the different types of political parties. There are really 4 different types of political parties that exist. The first, the one you know, is ideological. This is the Democrats, the Republicans, an opinion on everything, really an ideology. Okay? The second is the single issue party, a political party based just on one issue, like the Green Party and environmentalism. What's the difference between a single issue political party and an interest group? There's one fundamental difference between the two. What is it? What's the fundamental difference between a political party and an interest group itself? Yes?
One runs for president, one doesn't.
Correct. Single issue political parties run candidates. Interest groups do not. They merely endorse candidates. Okay? The third type of political party is a splinter party, a party that breaks off from one of the larger parties, like the Democrats or Republicans, over an issue. When the Democratic Party supported integrating blacks and whites in public places, the Dixiecrats broke off from the Democrats because they felt that integration was wrong and they wanted to keep segregation. The final type of political party is the economic protest party. If the Tea Party were to break away from the Republican Party, they would be an economic protest party, or a party that believes the way the government is run or the way the economy is run is wrong and needs to be changed. Do you understand these 4 types of political parties? Good. Get out a sheet of paper.